Okay. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to the North Carolina Cryptid and Paranormal Project. Glad you could be on with us tonight. We have a really special guest on, eyewitness, survivor, however you want to put it. This guy was 13 years old, had had one of these Sasquatch attack on him, stalked him, and he got away. And he's here to talk about it. So I'll let him get right into it. And real quick, if anyone has questions, we're gonna kind of wait till we get to the end of this podcast. If anyone has questions, save them for the end because he has some dramatic details. And hey, everybody in the chat: Steve, Nana, Lori, Miss NCCP, Mark Holt, Rooster, welcome, and everyone else. Good to see you all. So, without further ado, we're gonna bring him on and get him in here. Hey, man.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that.
You're good. You're good.
All right. Well, I want to say hi to everybody.
Yeah,
and,
go for
it. Thank everybody for coming up and sitting around to listen while we talk about this. What happened to me, it was the summer of 1988, and we lived up behind the Canal Mall in Charleston, West Virginia. And anyway, McCorkle Avenue run in front of the mall, and behind the mall, I still can't remember the name of that road, but the road I lived off of was 57th Street, and it teed into that road behind the mall and shot way up between two mountains, and it kind of split off to the left. And the second road to the left was Victory Avenue, but those two roads to the left kind of come together in a V. And right at the tip of that V is the house that I used to live in, which is long gone by now. I mean, well, I've looked on Google Earth. It's no longer there, but the carport is still there, believe it or not. But they had actually dug in to the mountain some so that they could put this house on this lot. And you could open up the back door and just reach out and touch where they had cut in. And you could even walk up to the top of that cut and give a hop, and it's like 3-foot gap, and you're on the roof of the house. Anyway, I was new to the area. I wasn't good at making friends. Didn't like being at the house. My dad, he would drink a lot, and it wasn't a very pleasant environment to be in when he was drinking. So I would go up in the mountains and explore. And real convenient having that mountain right behind my house. And this is not the first time I'd been in the mountains. We had actually moved to Charleston from Rand, and before there, we lived in a little town called Man, West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And anyway, this little town of Man, West Virginia had a population of less than 100 people. And we were always up in the woods hunting. We would make our own bows and arrows and hunt squirrels and rabbits. So, I mean, I wasn't a stranger to the woods. I'd go fishing all the time by myself. I always went out in the mountains by myself. There was nothing at all to scare me or deter me from going back up in there. So when we moved to Kanawha City, I just loved the mountains, and that's where I hung out. It wasn't unusual for me to go up in the mountains hiking, and I'd hear sticks break, and I mean, like a big limb, a slow break, just crack, 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 pop, I heard it all the time. I would heard wood knocks. I didn't know what they were. And I'd hear whoops and all kinds of weird noises at night, especially at night. Anyway, it wasn't unusual for me to camp out overnight in the mountains. Eventually, I did make a couple of friends, and they lived straight up 57th Street. They lived up there in a mobile home. And right behind their mobile home, there was a steep gully, and a steep gully went down and then back up, and it topped off at an old logging road, an old abandoned logging road that circled this mountain. So I found out that it was a lot easier for me to go up the mountain and around the logging road and down and over to their house. So I cleared off a bunch of vines and briars and used a shovel and dug in and foothold so I could go down and back up the other side. Otherwise, there was no other way to cross this gully. Anyway, and the reason why I went this way is because 57th Street, after you pass Victory Avenue, it gets extremely steep. I mean, people didn't like driving cars down this road. And as kids, you couldn't ride a skateboard or a bicycle down it. It wasn't safe. The old BMX bikes with the pedal back brakes, if you hit your brakes going down, your back tire would just slide all the way down this hill. It was that steep. So, like I said, I would just cross over the mountain and visit my friends that way. Anyway, this went on for months, me going up there, and my friends being brothers and a year apart, they got into a lot of fights with each other. And they would get grounded a lot. So if they were grounded, I'm out there playing in the mountains to stay away from the house, or I'm going to the Kanawha River and I'm going catfishing. So, needless to say, I started getting this strange feeling whenever I hiked this mountain that I was being watched. And you'd look around and there would be nobody around or nothing around. And what was also odd is if there was birds and squirrels, they were at the tree line by the people's houses. Mm-hmm. They didn't go back in the deep woods.
Yeah.
And me hiking this area for a year, I never once saw any large game animal or any deer tracks. I never saw any bear tracks up there. There was no animals on this particular mountain. And I mean, it was really odd because, again, I had been hunting before on my own. I mean, I'd been hunting since I was 10. So I've been hunting 2 years, almost 3 years at this time. And there was no animals. There's no animal signs, no tracks, nothing.
Right.
But anyway, I would keep hiking further and further back up into these mountains and woods. And in recent times, I've researched that area with Google Maps and Earth, and I discovered I was actually going on the backside of the Kanawha National Forest. And this is not the area where people visited or allowed to go. I mean, game wardens and, the caretakers, they never went back there. There were no trails, no signs of people, nothing. I mean, it's just beautiful mountains. And there wasn't a whole lot of underbrush up there either. You know how like here in Tennessee where I live, I go up in the woods, I'm constantly moving small saplings and stuff out of the way so I can walk. But it was like all the underbrush was kind of clear.
It was already clear, like it was brush hogged by something else.
Or like an area that you fenced in and put goats in where there's no briars or underbrush or anything. But this whole mountaintop was like this.
Oh, wow.
And the leaves, instead of being fluffy and all that, they were fairly well packed down. Where everybody else, everywhere else you walk, I mean, you're stirring up leaves, kicking them over, and you can tell where a human walks through because the leaves are turned over. Where up there it was just flat. Anyway, I started seeing something peek out from behind trees at long distances and stuff. And I never really, considered that this could be a Bigfoot. I had no idea those things existed until years after this. I mean, I had no clue. I didn't watch TV. I didn't read books, and this is not something you talk about. Also, in this area that I lived, there were streetlights. The kids had to be indoors before the streetlights came on or they got in trouble.
That's how it was back then in the 80s. You're about the same age as me. We've talked before, and this is pretty much, when streetlights came on, everybody had to go in, and if you didn't go in, you're getting your ass handed to you from your folks.
Right. Well, up in West Virginia in that area, streetlights come on, you better be in the house. Mm-hmm. But when I lived in Rand, West Virginia, the kids run the streets all night. It didn't matter. They were out until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning running the streets. Whenever we moved to Greer, South Carolina, same thing. The kids were always just running around playing, and whenever they got tired of it and it started getting real late, then they go home about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But for kids to get in trouble, if they weren't in the house whenever the streetlights come on, I mean, you got tore up. And the parents would yell at you, not my own parents, but other parents would yell at me, you better get home right now. Always had to be in before dark. And then right after dark, everybody ate supper. All the lights went off. Everybody went to bed. Nobody stayed up late watching TV. And some of the parents would even yell at me, you better stay out of those woods. You don't know what's up there. And I even had an old man that lived down from me that never talked to anybody. But he stopped me one day and he's like, hey, boy, you better stay out of those mountains. there's things out there you don't understand. And I didn't know. I mean, my grandfather, he had said something about, you better get in the house or the boogers will get you. I didn't know what a booger was.
Just going to ask about the booger thing. Have you had people say, like, stay, get in the house or the booger man's going to get you? Like, you've heard that before, right?
Oh, yeah. I heard it more than once from my grandfather.
Okay.
And my mom had even said it to me a few times, but I don't think she ever saw anything like I did. But anyway, I kept going back up in there just further and further. And after a while of me doing this, I would get up in the morning and there would be these giant, 15, 16-inch footprints in the dew wet grass around my house.
Oh, nice.
And, it was circling my house several times, and then it would go back up the mountain. And I was noticing that the trail that I would take, its track would take the exact same trail that I would take to go up the mountain and come back down. It would come down my trail and go back up like it was tracking me like a bloodhound.
Right. Did you think this was anything strange, or did you think this was something that was stalking you at the time, or did you find it odd that you were seeing these tracks?
I was a dumb kid.
Yeah.
And I thought it was neat, but I never even dreamed about what it could have been.
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, I've got some giant following me around or, whatever. I didn't really think a whole lot of it. And I didn't think that I was going up there in its home disturbing it either. But that's exactly what I was doing, was I was going into its home and its territory, and I was disturbing it. Yeah. Pretty dumb. I should have heeded the warnings, but again, I was a dumb 12-year-old, getting ready to be a 13-year-old kid. And I made a game of it. And I messed around with this thing and would play jokes on it. And, it would do wood knocks, and I started doing wood knocks back to it. And, I'd see it peek out from behind the tree, and I'd flip at the bird, dumb stuff kids do. But this is what I was doing to it. And I'm pretty sure I was irritating it. And that's why it was coming down and checking out the house. And because I would hear it outside and I'd hear it touch the windows of my room. And thing was, I wasn't that safe in the house because my bedroom was a glassed-in porch on the front of the house with heavy drapes so I could have privacy. So I've got like 3 feet of wall and then the rest glass all the way up to the 8-foot ceiling.
So it was pretty much a sunroom turned into a bedroom that you were sleeping in that was surrounded by windows. And that's all you had blocking you from it.
Yeah, all I had was glass and prayers and a heavy curtain to keep it from getting a hold of me. I mean, the thing could have busted the window, reached through, grabbed my head, and yanked me out because the head of my bed was up against one of these big windows. It was pretty dumb to be going out there antagonizing this, but I was a kid. I was playing with something new.
You didn't know what it was. You didn't really know what you were doing. You didn't know the trajectory of what could come out, the outcome. You didn't know the intense outcome that could have happened from what you were doing until you really got to that part. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm a 12-year-old kid. The scariest thing I've seen was my dad when he was drunk and mad.
Right.
That's the scariest thing I've seen. But I'm up here and I'm messing with this thing. And I'd seen it like at a distance, but not the full silhouette. I just see like the head peek out from behind a tree, things like that, but not all of it. And so I made a game out of it, and pretty stupid. But needless to say, I went real far back in there one day right after I turned 13. Mm-hmm. And just had my 13th birthday. I got this new survival knife with a cap that unscrews and has your fishing gear and matches and stuff in it with a compass.
Yeah, the compass, the fishing hooks, the waterproof matches. It was like I think everybody had one back in the day. It was like, you paid like $10 at the local Army Navy surplus store, and you went in the woods and you played with it, and you tested out all the gadgets that were in it because you thought you were Rambo, pretty much, because that's when Rambo came out.
Right, and the little cheap wire saw you use it one time that breaks. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, I had that, and I got a canteen. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to try these out. And I went hiking way back up in there again on the backside of the Kanawha National Forest, and we're talking hours of hiking to get you up there. Me today, there's no way I can make it in one day. But as a 13-year-old that been doing this for years, hiking up mountains and stuff, I was in great shape. I could start at the base of this mountain and just straight hike without a break, just power walk up to the top of this mountain. No problem. I was in great shape. I mean, whenever I was 14, we took a weightlifting class at school, and I could actually leg press 500 pounds at 14. That's how strong my legs were. So I go trekking up this thing, and I find me this big lake, or well, not a lake, actually, a pond up there. And I want to try out my fishing gear. So I hunt me up a couple of worms. I'm out there and I catch a couple of little bluegill. And I'm like, wow, this is neat. I could build me a little camp up here. And I can come up here and camp out over a whole weekend and just eat the fish I catch. I thought it was a good idea. So I messed around and I found some sticks leaning up into other sticks, dead wood. And I took this wood and I pulled it out of these trees. Never even dawned on me how they got there.
Exactly. Yeah, you were taking apart structures for wood.
I was dumb, and I took these things apart, and I built me a little lean-to shelter, and I covered it with leaves and everything so it stayed dry in the rain. And I'm like, all right, I've been up here long enough. I'm going back home. So I walked back down to the house, and again, couple-hour hike. For back then it was not too bad of a hike. Today it would kill somebody. But so I hiked back to the house, and my friends were coming off of grounding soon. So instead of going up back in the mountains, I was hanging out with my friends, playing dirt lot basketball and stuff. And then the report cards come in or something like that, and they got in trouble again. And they got grounded, and it was usually a week they were grounded, or 2 weeks sometimes. But anyway, here we go. I'm starting to get nervous again talking about this.
That's all right. You need to pause for a minute. You take your time,
Well, and before I tell everybody this, I want to tell you how I feel about it now and my thoughts on it now. I went up there and I made a major mistake, and I made this thing very angry. And this thing corrected me for it. Just like you have a bunch of chimpanzees and you got a little problem child chimp and he gets in a lot of trouble, the adults are going to correct him. And I got corrected, and I got seriously corrected. And my thoughts on it now are, if this thing wanted me, it could have had me. If it wanted me dead, it would have killed me. So I warn everybody out there, don't try this. What I'm about to tell you, don't try it. And you were going to say something?
I was going to say, you are, exactly, like you're just agreeing with you, like exactly on the factor of don't try this at home. And, looking back on it and all your, thinking about reflection, it's amazing that you made it out. Like you said, that if it wanted you dead, it could have had you dead like the snap of its finger, just like that, the glimpse of an eye, pretty much.
Right. I mean, if it wanted me, it could have grabbed me up without ever warning me, without ever screaming at me. It could have just leaped out of there and gone.
Yep. You'd be MIA 411, back in the, the late 80s.
Yeah. I could have been one of the first people that get wrote about on missing 411 without people knowing the true story. I could have been put up as a kid, went hiking in the woods and got lost and was never found. But anyway, like I said, I go out Sasquatch hunting now with a good friend of mine, and I also go out by myself, and I have infrared cameras and stuff that I use. And I've actually got them around my house now. During deer season, they throw rocks on my roof. I've been warned out of the woods and out of my deer blind by them. And I respect their space. If I get a warning, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And if you guys are ever faced with one, number one, don't make eye contact. Number two, don't run. And number three, don't smile. eye contact and smiling to any and all apes it's a challenge. So just look down at the ground, look away from them, back out slow. But me, when I was 13, I ran for my life. Okay, so here goes.
Okay.
I went back up there after my friends got in trouble, and my lean-to was tore up and these structures were put back up. And
so the thing, real quick, the thing that you took down with the trees and the branches and the structures that you saw that you paid no mind to make a lean-to out of, you went back there and everything that you made was destroyed and everything that you destroyed was put back together, right?
that's correct.
Okay.
And I guess I kind of thought it was some kids messing around up there or whatever. Because, I mean, I didn't know if there was a house within a mile of there and that was a place kids went in there to play. I mean, it wasn't unusual in my mind for kids to be out in the woods. But in that area, it was highly unusual for anybody to be in the woods. And you would think that living in that area in the mountains, that's where the kids would want to play. But no, they weren't allowed. So I went up there and go ahead.
Makes you wonder why they weren't allowed to play in the woods.
I think everybody in that area knew what was up in that area. I think that they knew, and that's why they would be indoors before dark. And I mean, how unusual is it for somebody to work second or third shift now?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in that area worked first shift.
Right.
Well, anyway, I went back up there and the structures were fixed, and there was these little stick figures, made out of sticks and tied together with bark hanging in trees too. And I thought that was kind of weird, but I was mad that my little camp that I'd set up, because I'd hauled rocks over and made me a fire pit and dug it in, put rocks in the bottom. I was going to camp up there and my fire pit was tore up. All the rocks were thrown everywhere. And that made me mad. And of course, I was in high school at that time, and I had recently read the book White Fang. And if you guys have ever read that book White Fang, there's like a whole schmeal about how dogs are marking their territory, and you know what I mean. So I tore down those little stick figures and threw them, and I rebuilt my little lean-to shelter again and my little fire pit. And then I walked around and I peed on quite a few trees, and I peed up as high as I could on them and a couple of these structures. And I started getting this feeling like I was being watched, and I started feeling nervous. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend the night up here. I'm going to go home. So I went home, and it was a couple of days later that I went back up, and what I saw on that mountaintop, I've never seen anything like it before or since, but I have heard of it from one other person. I went up there, and there had been no storms or anything, but if you can imagine this, all the trees up to 8 inches thick, it looked like a giant had taken his sword and swung that sword and cut all those trees off at about 6 to 7 feet high. Every tree was snapped off about 6 to 7 feet up in the air. And we're not talking like, if a storm blows over a tree and it breaks, it splinters, or what they call a rocking chair. These were like exploded frayed. Like they were like something grabbed it here and pushed up here until it splintered above its hand, is what they look like. And the amount of power and force to do that is it's terrifying. The amount of power that it takes to break these things.
I know. Trust me. I've seen stuff like that. I know exactly what you're talking about, and to see that many toppled over in an area where it almost looks like a war zone.
It was a whole mountaintop. It was like the movie scene in the first Predator movie where the guy's there with the Gatling gun and they just wipe out all the trees. It was like that. They were just all wiped out, cleared. And it's just a frightening thing for me to go back to think of. But I knew that I had made something very, very angry. And initially what I did was I went up there and I took down its warnings that it put up that was nicely warning me to stay out.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up there and I marked its warnings and its territory as my own, just like a dog will go and pee on a tree, mark its territory. I went up there in this thing's home and I marked its territory as my own. So I physically challenged this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe if I was an adult, I would not be here.
No.
If I was an adult back then, it would have torn me apart. I got this feeling of imminent danger. And I mean, I could feel it in my bones. I was shaking. Had the cold sweat. I was in danger and I didn't know where that feeling was coming from. And so what I did was I slowly started working my way out of the mountains, watching over my shoulder. And it was several miles. I would say 5 or 6 miles, from where I first initially had that feeling to my friend's house. And that's the area I was going. It was the closest place. And on my way, I picked up a pole, or a sapling that was about 6 foot long. And I sharpened the end in a spear, not because I thought I could do this thing harm with it, just to make me feel better.
Yeah.
But I worked my way out of that mountain and I worked my way to Logging Road and around to the gully and climbed down and back up. And again, to remind you, this is the only spot that anything was physically able to cross this gully. And the rest of the gully is choked with vines and it's briars. It's impassable. Needless to say, I got up there and there's a picnic table right there on the other side of the gully in my friend's yard. I sat down at it. They're doing yard work. They're still grounded, but I'm allowed to hang out and talk to them. They're out there raking leaves and stuff like that. Well, the sun starts going down. I hadn't been there too long, but I totally forgot everything that I'd just been through. I'm a 13-year-old kid. My memory is like 5 minutes long whenever it's playtime or talk time. I dropped my spear down and I sit there and bull crafted with them for a while, about stuff teenage boys will do, about what girl's the hottest at school, whatever.
Exactly.
Anyway,
BMX
the sun
fight.
went down. The sun went down, street lights came on, and my friends got in trouble. They were out after dark.
Oh, dang.
And, man, anyway, Dad come outside and he's like, you guys in the house, you go home now. And I was like, okay. And then I pick up my spear and I remembered why I went there.
Mm-hmm.
And it all come back to me that, oh man, I'm in trouble. But at the same token, I'm like, okay, well, I've been around people. I've been in civilization right here in this yard. If it did follow me, it's given up and it's gone on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got street lights on one side of the road, and on the opposite side of the road, there's only 2 houses. My friend's uncle and an abandoned brick house is falling down that had grapevines and blackberries growing around it, and we would pick the grapes and blackberries. Anyway, I start walking down there, and this house is 150 or so yards down from where I was at. And, in between those two places is this little fenced in field they used to garden, but they just let it grow up. And I'm walking on the right-hand side of the road, street lights on the left. And this is a full moon night, so I'm okay. I should be all right. I can see really good with the street lights and the full moon. I could see anything coming. So I start walking down through there, but I'm walking slow, got my head on a swivel. I'm watching around, feeling okay somewhat until I get to that house. And when I get to that house, and guys, pardon my French, but I got this oh shit feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And this feeling of absolute terror going through my body. And I had no idea where this was coming from. And I smelled this rancid smell like, I don't know, like burnt, wet dog and rotting flesh when I got to that house. So I slowed down even more, and I'm tiptoeing along the front of this house. And when I get to the far side of this house, I heard something in the vines and briars to my right. So I stopped dead in my tracks. And I turn and look to the right, and there's like this 8-foot tall brick wall that's still standing from this part of the house that's collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And I see something hunkered down in the briars and stuff, and I'm thinking, what is that? Is that a bear? And then it stands up. And I mean, if anybody has seen a video of a bear when it stands up, you don't see shoulders. It's like its neck and shoulders blend in. This thing had shoulders like a human, and they were like 3.5, 4 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing stood up, and I couldn't see its hands, because they were still down in the briars and stuff. And it was like this giant linebacker wearing the football pad, so you can't see a neck, but its head was kind of conical shaped,
Mm-hmm.
but not really sharp cone shaped, kind of like a gorilla head shape. I've got a street light behind me and the full moon in front of me. I could see this thing. And I'm telling you, it was not covered in fur. It was covered in hair.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like dark brown hair that went to black tips on the hair. And I mean, it was like that long. It was like 2-3 inch hair all over its whole body.
Wow.
And the build of this thing, I mean, it's my legs, and I'm 6'2", 190 pounds, decent shape. My legs are smaller than the thing's arms.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, Arnold Schwarzenegger Zilla.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so massive. I stood there and I looked at this thing's face, and it had a face like kind of a cross between a gorilla and a Neanderthal man. It had like a wide, flat nose, but yet you could see looking straight at it, you could kind of see the nostril openings. Wide jaw. I don't think you could break that jaw with a jackhammer. And then it had like a sloped brow like a caveman. But I stood there and I looked at it a couple of seconds, and then it let out a screaming roar like the blast from a train horn. I mean, I physically felt the force of this screaming roar. And when it did that, oh man, I'm getting chills. When it did that, it startled me. In involuntary response, I dropped that spear and took off. I took off running for my life. And this hill, again, to remind you, I was running down. You can't ride a bicycle down it and keep in control, or a skateboard. I ran down this hill, and I'll tell you what, if Usain Bolt, or whatever his name is, the world's fastest track star, if he was beside me, I'd have passed him.
No, I bet.
And this thing crashed through these vines and briars, and I heard a slap on the road, and I believe it might have stumbled, slapped its hand on the road, went back upright, and come after me.
Mm.
I could hear its footsteps thudding on that pavement behind me. And we're talking, this is like 3/4 of a mile to a mile to where my road turns off to the right, and then 1/4 mile from there to my house. And it seemed like mere seconds that I was there. But when I went to turn off of 57th Street onto Victory Avenue, just full tilt running, this thing grabbed the back of my shirt at the collar and yanked, and it ripped the whole back of my shirt off.
Mm.
And I still remember that shirt to this day. It was a Tony Hawk skateboard shirt. And they were made for skateboarders, so they were actually really thick cotton. They were thicker than a normal T-shirt.
Yeah, they were durable.
Snatched it off me for just no problem. Rip. Yeah, you were gonna say something?
They were durable. They were meant for wiping out and not getting torn up so bad. They costed a little extra money, but like those and like the the OP shorts and like everything that the skate, the skate style was back then. The shoes, all that stuff was
Right.
just so adorable back then because it was made to withstand wiping out, falling, flipping off your board, jumping off, falling, whatever the fact was, it could handle some road rash. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like motorcycle gear for a skateboard.
Yeah.
And it just snatched that shirt right off my back. I still had part of the shirt, but the whole back of the shirt was gone. And I hit that corner on Victory Avenue off of 57th Street, and I leaned over like I was on a motorcycle. I leaned into that turn. That's how fast I was running. If I hadn't leaned into it, I'd have been rolling. I ran up to the house. I snatched open the front door, dove under my bed after I'd slammed that door shut and locked it. And now this part I don't remember. My mother told me about this.
Mm-hmm.
I was under my bed, and that's the last thing I remember for several minutes. My dad walked in there, and he was a big man. I mean, he was a war veteran, combat veteran. He was like 6'4" and like 280, 300 pounds. He was a big man. He grabbed me by my ankle and snatched me up under that bed, and I'm screaming and swinging when he grabbed me. And he jerked me up by my shirt, or what was left of it, and he slapped my face and told me to get a hold of myself, carried me in the living room, and physically me into this chair. And then he's like, "What is wrong with you?" And I was freaking out for a few more minutes of screaming, and he slapped me a couple more times. He shook me and told me to get a hold of myself. And he, "What is wrong with you?" And I told him, "Something chased me home." And he goes, "What do you mean something chased you home?" I said, "I was up in the mountains. Something chased me home. It was trying to kill." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And, everybody was thinking I was playing a game. They didn't believe me. And I said, "It ripped my shirt." And I stood up and I turned around and showed them the shirt. And they saw fingernail marks widely spaced going down my back, not claw marks, fingernail marks.
Wow.
But they were too wide to be from a human. It was from a massive hand. And I took the rest of my shirt off, which the back of my shirt I never found. I never saw. I don't know what happened with the part of my shirt it ripped off.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my dad, saw that. And so he walks over to the window in the living room and he pulls back the curtain about an inch or so, to peek out. And there's street lights out in front of the house. I mean, the whole front of the house is lit from street lights. The back of the house is dark. He pulls up that curtain, and I've never, ever seen my dad scared. But he looked out that window, and when he turned and looked at me, he was white as a sheet. And he said, "Boy, what the hell did you bring out of those mountains to us?" And I said, I have no idea what it is. I don't know what it is. So he started lights, and he's like, "Everybody go to bed." And when he said something like that, you did it. So we all start going to bed. And I laid down and I'm curled in a ball on my bed, and I'm scared. I mean, I'm surrounded by glass.
Mm-hmm.
This thing is outside. I'm scared to death. But eventually, I guess I hit this adrenaline crash where I finally fell asleep. And it was, I don't know, a few hours, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I was hearing noises outside of my bedroom. And it was a loud sniffing sound, like, a dog will walk up to something and start sniffing really fast.
Yeah.
It was like that, but it was almost as loud as a deer will make a blowing sound in the woods,
Yep.
which is loud. I mean, you can hear a deer blow for like 100 yards.
Oh, yeah, they're loud.
They're very loud. It was almost that loud, but it's sniffing around my windows. It's sniffing around the door. And I'm just laying there shaking, and I pull my blankets off and I crawl underneath my wrought iron bed, and I curl up as far up in the corner as I can. I cover up my blankets and I hide, and eventually I fall asleep again. Well, this went on for several weeks of me going to bed and hearing this outside of my bedroom. It would be sniffing, and I'd hear it tapping on the glass and touching the glass. And it was stalking me. And I'd get up the next morning and I would walk outside, and there'd be these footprints and muddy handprints on the windows around my room. Well, my dad had an old Plymouth station wagon that he drove to work. He worked for Charleston Parks and Recreation. And he, I don't know, I guess the battery was bad, or it had a bad charging system or something in the car. But he put a battery charger on that car every night in that carport that I mentioned earlier. And anyway, it was like 2 days after this thing chased me home. My dad would wake me up early in the morning before he'd go to work and get up, put your robe on, go outside and unhook the battery charger. That became a routine for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He was sending me out to unhook the battery charger.
Because he didn't want to do it.
Right. I think that he started to go outside and it was out there.
And he saw it, or he saw evidence of it out there. One or the other.
Right. And like previous to this thing chasing me home, I had mentioned to my dad about the footprints in the grass. And he's like, oh, it's nothing. You know, I guess he might have thought it was his footprints. I don't know. But yeah, he started sending me out to unhook the battery charger. Rain, shine, didn't matter. He would wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go outside to unhook the battery charger and close the hood of his car and start his car. And I believe he was sending me out there as cannon fodder. Now, I mean, it makes sense, but now, yeah. But back then, I didn't understand why. I didn't even think about why he could have been doing that. But it was probably about a week after this thing chased me home that I woke up in the middle of the night, and it looked like the street light that was at the dead peak of that corner that I'd mentioned. It looked like the street light was out, but the one on the right and the one on the left were still on. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't hear it out there. You know, I didn't see the shadow, this giant shadow that I'd seen many times walk around my windows after it chased me home. I didn't see that. So I get up and I walk over, and again, 13-year-old dumb, don't think too far ahead. And parents, please excuse your kids. They don't always think ahead. Logical thinking comes in your 20s and 30s, not when you're 13. But I pulled this drape open, and I'm like, oh, it's all black out there. Okay, the street light's out. And then it squats down, and its face is right in front of mine, not 6 inches away. And yeah, it's. I tell you, if I was an artist, I could draw this face to this day. All these years later, I'm 47. It happened when I was 13, and I could draw it to a T today. What it looked like.
I think you should get a hold of Miss Sibylla Irwin. Her name is Sibylla Irwin. Look her up on Facebook. She does artist renderings of any kind of encounters like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, werewolf, dogman, whatever the fact is, and she'll actually get it. I mean, everyone that I've known that has worked with her, she does spot on to what that person saw. So I would look into getting a hold of Miss Sibylla Irwin and contacting her, let her know, that what you had encounter with, and she'll work with you. So yeah.
All righty. And anybody else listening, you guys do the same thing. If you have encounters, and again, don't be afraid to talk about it, but talk about it to the right people in the right venue. Don't just, sit at a bar having a drink. It's like, hey, when I was a kid, I saw a Bigfoot. No, you're not going to get a good experience from that. But in the right venues, the right groups, the right people, yes. If you see one, talk about it. It helps. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I already described its face, but the size of its head. If you guys have ever seen the movie Princess Bride, it stars Andre the Giant.
Yep.
There's a scene in that movie where Wesley, the hero of the movie, he's fighting Andre the Giant, and he jumps on his back and grabs him in a chokehold. If you look at the size of Andre the Giant's head compared to that normal sized man, that's about the size comparison I can give you with this thing's head. I mean, it was over 8 feet tall. It was 500 to 600 pounds. And if you think about it, a 400-pound gorilla, it is said that they can bench press 4 times their body weight. So if we're talking an 800-pound ape, that's 3,200 pounds it could bench press or more. I mean, the power of these things is immense. And I'm looking at it face to face through.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at it face to face, 6 inches away through a thin piece of glass. But it wasn't very long after this. It was maybe 3 weeks after this thing started stalking, and my dad had seen it, that my dad quit his job. We rented a U-Haul, put the old Plymouth station wagon on a tow dolly, and we moved without a place to go. And we just went south. And we ended up, eventually running low enough on money to where he was looking for a place to live. And I remember us stopping in this little town. He went into a real estate office, and next thing you know, we're moving into a house in Greer, South Carolina. But yeah, we moved to avoid this thing.
Yeah, you got the heck out of Dodge. I was going to say their strength is immense. If you remember when they did the Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, and they did like the power, they did the whole dynamics of the power and pounds per square inch and like their strength compared to like the size of a gorilla, on a scale of that, then compared to something that's 10 to 12 foot tall, and they added the strength. I mean, it was incredible. The PSI, all that, the impact of bite. It was incredible.
It's a man.
I mean, these things can run 45 miles an hour from what I heard.
And I mean, look at me, I was a 13-year-old kid. I turned 14 in South Carolina, and we had a weightlifting class. I'm a 14-year-old kid that weighs like $160, $170, and I could leg press 500 pounds.
Right.
That's from me walking up and down the mountains all the time. I had built up that much strength on my legs.
I believe you. When I was in my prime, I was leg pressing 1,000 pounds, no bullshit. And Melissa in the chat, he didn't just move away. He was with his family. He was a teenage child, so his family, his dad moved him out of state because they were tired of getting harassed by this thing continuously every night. So just to let you know, if you didn't hear the whole part.
Yeah, see, my dad worked for Charleston Parks and Recreation. I mean, he worked as a city employee on that good money. And he quit that job and just loaded whatever we could in a U-Haul, station wagon on a tow dolly, and we headed south until we ended up in Greer, South Carolina, and then he started working for a cabinet shop.
Right.
I mean, you go from a city employee to working in a cabinet shop, that's a big pay cut, because he had worked at Charleston Parks and Recreation for 2.5 years. I mean, when the football stadium, I can't remember the team for Charleston at that time, but there was a big professional football field and stadium there, and they paid my dad extra to do the blueprints and to build the big stadium doors, the big gigantic ones that were like 20 foot tall, and he built those and designed them to where they were easy open and close for just, 1 or 2 people to open them. And they gave him a huge bonus. They bought the blueprints off of him.
Wow.
And for him to quit a job like that he had just opened a door as an architect, it's, I mean...
it had to be serious for him to leave just like that on a drop of a dime, to leave something good and then go to a job that wasn't paying half as good as what he left, just because he wanted him and his family to be safe. So I'm sure he was upset, but he also wanted to be safe at the same time, and so be it,
Right. I mean, my mom, she had me, and I could still remember the stupid phone number. She listened to a radio station called V100, and I know it's still there today in Charleston. It was 925-8100 was the phone number, because I dialed it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would win movie tickets and tickets to the Greyhound Park, and Greyhound Park, and you got $1,000 voucher for betting at the Greyhound Park, and we left all that behind.
Dang.
And I mean, back in that day, $1,000 was like $4,000 now.
Oh yeah,
$4,000 to $5,000.
it was a lot back then. Yeah, exactly. So if you want to go into the questions for the next part, if you're okay with that, I mean, actually,
yeah, I was trying to make sure we had at least 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah. You want to just do like the moral of the story, like what not to do when you're in the woods when you encounter something like that?
If you're out in the woods and you have to use the bathroom, kick leaves and dirt out of the way, urinate on the ground. If you urinate on an object that is standing upright, any object, a rock, a tree, a log, anything standing up and down, if you urinate on it, you are marking it as your territory in any animal's mind. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to walk off trail to use the bathroom and it's an unfamiliar area, don't go at 10 or 15 feet. And again, urinate on the ground or defecate on the ground. Don't put that kind of scent on something that some animal could have marked. Mm-hmm. And this goes with Sasquatch, it goes with dogs, it goes with wolves. Because anytime you urinate on an object like that, you are marking his territory, and our noses don't work like theirs do. And you can't always tell that something is a territorial boundary.
I get it. Big time. Even a bear, just a natural predatorial animal. Bear, like you said, bear, fox, coyote, wolf, Wolverine, all that stuff. The urine marks. That's the scent. You're pretty much claiming it yours. So yeah, we're gonna get into the questions. If anyone has any questions, we'll do the last segment, the last about 8 minutes right now. If anyone has questions, put them up in caps for Mr. Chester. So I had a question for you. Do you think that, I think I asked you this earlier, do you think that if you would have backed out slowly and kind of got out of there very easily and kind of nonchalantly, do you think you would have had the same encounter as you did?
Well, when it roared and screamed at me, if I'd have backed out, I would not probably be here.
Right.
And as far as me going up there and seeing the damage and, seeing the damage on the mountaintop from what I had done, I did back out slowly. Yeah. And it still followed me.
Right. Okay.
Did your dad tell your mom what he witnessed outside? I do not know if they ever spoke with each other about that. My mother passed away several years ago, and she's never mentioned it to me. But she did, however, state that the reason why we moved out of West Virginia to South Carolina was because of that. Mm-hmm. But she never went over their conversations. And my mother, whenever I had the fingernail marks on my back, had taken a picture with a Polaroid Instamatic camera. Mm-hmm. And as old people know what that is, but the younger generation, they don't. It's a camera that takes a cartridge, and when you take the picture, it comes out and you shake it, and the picture right then, it develops on its own. But you can't turn off the flash on that camera. And I had thought about trying to get a picture, but I just knew if that flash went off, it would have triggered this thing.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay, here's another one. Have you ever communicated?
I actually do it here at my house now. But my communication is, and I've had other people been out here, I'll sit on my porch and I do wood knocks during deer season, and they'll answer back.
Oh wow.
Because I've got like a mountain behind my house. I'm actually halfway up the mountain where
Nice.
I live. And so I'm like it was in West Virginia. I walk out my back door, there's mountain. And then the road I use to get to my house, on the opposite side of it is a mountain. And then I've got a mountain to one side and the other. And so I live in a pretty good wooded area. But I
Okay.
can go outside and I can do wood knocks, and most of the time they answer back. But generally, I'm like, take only pictures, leave only footprints out here.
I gotcha. All right, here's another one from Al. Al Santoriga, the Squatch father.
Uh, oh, how long before we went back? Okay. Well, I had went up there and I had urinated on the structures and trees, and it was about 2 days before I went back up there, and the mountaintop was tore up, and I was carefully working my way out of there. So it was about 2 days after I urinated on everything up there that the night happened where it roared at me and chased me out of the mountains and home, and then started stalking me, actively letting me know that it was outside of the house.
Yeah, I think he was referring to like after everything happened. Did you actually go back to that area where everything happened in the woods, where the
No,
campsite was? No. So you
no,
never went back
no.
there.
After it roared at me, I never went in the woods in that area. No.
Okay.
I didn't even go to the Kanawha River to go fishing after that. I stayed in my yard and in the house.
Wow, that's pretty gnarly. I mean, for you to be able to retell, and I know you kind of Dixie Cryptid. Big shout out to Cam Buckner from Dixie Cryptid because he's the one that brought you out of your element and got you to talk about this. But I'm just honored that you were willing to talk about it. And some people say, oh, you're just here to glorify encounters, but I'm really here for awareness to get people out, to give facts, knowledge, to make them not repeat the same mistakes that other people made. And same thing for you. You're here to give people awareness and knowledge, and maybe so that they'll, when they go out in the woods or if something happens, where they know what to do and what not to do, so they don't wind up, what happened to you could happen to them. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well, it's like this. I have nothing to gain from
Yep.
talking about this. I mean, you guys see my name right there.
Mm-hmm.
Jester Smith, aka Hillbilly. YouTube channel, Hillbilly Holler. I live in Middle Tennessee. Pretty easy to find me on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Middle Tennessee, Hartsville, Tennessee. Jester Smith. I mean, you could Google it. You'll have my address. I don't care. I have nothing to gain except for people laughing at me.
Right. Exactly.
So why would I lie about this? I mean, all it could do is cause me harm actually talking about this.
Yeah, you'll have people knocking on your door with suits on, asking you questions.
Yeah. No, I have. Well, actually, okay. I had been through that area a couple of times as a semi truck driver.
Mm-hmm.
And the closest I have been to that area was going through. I went down McCorkle Avenue one night years ago because a tanker truck wrecked up there on the interstate, and it was full of formaldehyde. It's been many years ago. So I took McCorkle Avenue to avoid it and told a bunch of other truck drivers, but that's the closest I've been up there since that incident.
You're good, Carlito. That's my partner, Carlito. Partner in crime, Carlito, Cryptid Paranormal Kingdom. If you want to be in a good group, if you're in my group too as well, the North Carolina. If you want to join a pretty good group, it's Cryptid Paranormal Kingdom. We started out together and we kind of branched off to different names. But I was going to say, if anyone has any really more questions for you, you're in my North Carolina group. If they could just tag you in the group and ask you any kind of questions, we got one more, and I think we're gonna call it a night. So here's the last question.
No, when I saw it through the window, it didn't scream at me, but the one time, and that's whenever It was beside the old red brick house. It was a red clay brick house, and that was the only time it ever screamed at me.
I think it said, "Did you scream when you saw it? Did you scream when you saw it?" That
I
in
don't
the
really remember if I did or I didn't. I don't
you probably
remember.
wouldn't remember. I mean, you were probably in shock. Your adrenaline was racing. Your body was. You probably got hit with infrasound. I mean, when that thing first roared, you said you felt it through your chest. I mean, it went through your whole body. You probably pissed yourself and didn't even know it.
Uh,
Sadly.
yeah, and the thing is, um, I've had PTSD from this for years. I mean, many, many years I've had PTSD. And even now, like tonight, since I talked about it, I'm probably going to be staring at my windows and stuff like that, just thinking about what I went through and remembering it. But, when I talk about it, it's not easy for me to talk about. It does cause me problems. And I'm probably going to be taking a Xanax to go to bed tonight,
Yeah.
which I have a prescription for them. But yeah, I do suffer from PTSD and anxiety because of it.
I
But
know the feeling. I know the
I'm
feeling.
working on my fears. I'm facing my fears. I have a good friend that has also had encounters that has caused him this. So when we go squatching together. We cover each other's backs, and it's easier for us to go out together instead of alone.
Absolutely. Two is better than one, especially when you're going into a dangerous situation that can possibly get worse at night, and especially in an active. I mean, you said you actually seen one recently. You want to talk
Yeah.
about that? We'll kind of end the show on that
Okay.
fact.
Before I talk about that again, I want to remind everybody, if they want you, they will have you, and you will have no warning. You can't protect yourself from them. And if you shoot one, it's a bad idea, because
Yes.
if there's others in the area, they are going to rip you apart. You're not going to survive it. If you survive it, you're lucky. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. You're better off with bear spray or a warning shot only. But yes, recently I've been going out with a good friend of mine, and we were sitting out on one of our private locations. I can't divulge the area. Sorry, it's in the state of Tennessee, and it's over an hour from me.
Mhm.
So that gives you a wide berth, because we're trying to keep people from invading these people's property and doing stupid stuff over there, because they have to live with this.
Mhm.
And if
Yep.
you go up there and you do something dumb, these people still own this property, and they're stuck with what you've made mad.
They're going to
We
get the.
can run away.
Yep.
But anyway, we were over there, and we were squatching, is what we call it. And we didn't see anything, so we decided to drive around on some back roads. And we checked out this area that's like a power line clearing
Mhm.
back in the woods. And we were using a FLIR camera. I'm watching the fields, and my buddy asked to look at him in the FLIR camera, which is body heat. It's not infrared. It's a thermal camera. So I hand him the thermal camera, and there's an old abandoned house to the right. And I look to the right. Here's this carport with a shed with a shingle roof. And this thing has its hand on the edge of the roof, and it's peeking around the corner at me. And it was a sandy blonde Sasquatch, or
Nice.
wood ape, or Bigfoot. But
Mhm.
it was about 7 foot tall. And I'd never heard of a sandy blonde one, but this is what I saw. My friend is going about 5 miles an hour in his truck. And me, after what I'd been through, and I'm coming over, finally getting over it. My stupid self. I'm not always the brightest person. You could ask my wife, she'll tell you. I pop the door open, I jump out of a moving truck and chase it. And when I do this, I'm like, oh shit. And I pop the door open. My friend that's driving, he locks the brakes up and throws it in park and jumps out. And he's on my tail. But I saw its face, or well, half its face.
Mhm.
I saw its right hand and arm as it was peeking around the shed. And then it turned and ran, and I saw the whole left half of its body. and the friend that was with me saw the whole left half of the body as it was running away. But
Nice.
yeah, me and this idiot friend of mine that had PTSD issues from his experience that he's not going to talk about.
Mm.
Yeah, we are both idiots chasing our biggest fear through a yard in a no trespassing area.
Sometimes that's the best therapy is going back and going after what you kind of had accounts with in the past, because it kind of restables your focus, your mentality. I mean, it does all that. Your emotions. It kind of gives you confidence back. So I give you
Right.
kudos for going back in the woods and doing research. But if anyone has any wants to look you up, if you want to do your channel real quick, your YouTube channel that you
I
started.
haven't I haven't done anything on YouTube in several years. It's I'm leaving it up there for the information that's on it, but I'm not really doing anything with it. I haven't done anything with it for a long time,
Mhm.
over a year, and I don't know. I've kind of lost interest in the YouTube, but I'm leaving the videos up there just to help other people. But I do have a warning. Please, for the love of God and for the sake of your life and your family and loved ones, don't go out there and do what I did to try to get a picture to make money.
Mhm.
Because I'm telling you, the one that I messed with, it got angry, it come after me, it corrected me, it ran us off, but it didn't kill me. But if you go up there and you do something like that, it can absolutely cost you your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Don't do it. It's not worth it.
that could be some of the missing 411 cases. People hiking or hunting in the woods, they pee on a tree, and boom, it was the wrong tree, and now they're
Yeah, I
gone.
mean, city folks, they are, they're shy and blah blah blah. He's going to walk off 3 or 4 feet and take a leak in the woods. A city person, a lot of times, will walk off 100, 200 yards, and it could be that they have disappeared because of that. Also, the people that have gone out camping and disappeared, they may have done that, and it's not a guy thing to go pee on a tree.
No,
Kick some leaves and dirt out of the way, pee, cover it back up. You're not marking your territory.
absolutely.
But all these, I know so many guys that are like, well, I got to go pee on a tree. That's a common thing with guys. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Respect them. Respect the area.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, Chester, I really do appreciate you sharing your account, your survival experience with us. Um, everyone in the chat, thanks for being here tonight. Just take the advice and be safe out there. That's all I can really tell you. Be
Take
safe in
only
the woods.
pictures, leave only footprints, carry a
Don't go
compass.
alone. Don't go alone, and do your thing and enjoy yourselves. God bless, and hopefully we can make it another week with the way the world's going. When we'll see is next week. Well, I appreciate you, Mr. Chester. I'll be talking to you probably sometime tomorrow, and thanks again for coming on tonight.
Not a problem. You have my number, and everybody have a wonderful evening, and God bless. Be safe.
Thank you, sir. Okay, everybody. Oopsie, wrong button. Y'all have a great night. Thanks, everyone. We actually had a pretty wild chat tonight. Hopefully we can come back next week. The way things are going in this world, with the banks and everything else. I'm not going to get into it, but y'all see the news. You'll see what's going on out there. Y'all be safe. Blessings and prayers for everybody. God bless. And have a great night. Thanks again for being here tonight. Appreciate you all.